How's it going, guys? I hope you're all doing well. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about something called corn. And when I say corn, I don't mean this corn, and I don't mean that corn either. Yeah, you know what corn I'm talking about. And if you don't, I'm sure you'll figure it out as we go along. I hope. Recently, there's been quite a discussion online in regards to corn and its alleged or reputed effects upon men at large. There's a large number of people right now, particularly women, who swear up and down that corn is causing the collapse of Western society. They allege that it is making men weaker, that it's responsible for men dropping out of the dating and marriage markets, and that it's even responsible for the plummet in birth rates that we're seeing globally, etc. At the moment, especially in conservative and Christian spaces, it's almost impossible to escape this narrative. I mean, it is literally everywhere you look right now. Now, you'll never see me defend corn. I believe it's a significant corrupting influence in men and women alike. I believe that men's tastes and men's preferences have been warped over the years as a result of desensitization brought about through corn consumption, and as a result, I believe many men today are now partial to things that would make normal men recoil in disgust. For instance, I believe it's the reason why so many men today are attracted to masculine women, including women with male physiques. I believe it's why so many men are attracted to other men, including trans women, and I believe corn, the excessive consumption of it, is a key reason why so many men transition in the first place. I also believe it's why so many men are open and receptive to transgressive intimate practices, and I believe it's why in the year 2017, for example, when thousands of men across America were propositioned by their wives and their girlfriends to try something new as part of a covert call to action, they agreed to it. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. I also believe it's capable of disrupting the intimacy and chemistry of marriages. I believe it often corrupts and perverts the intimacy of marriages, and I believe that lustfulness in general is a slippery slope and a damnable transgression if the person can't manage to get it under control, but outside of that, I honestly believe that's about the extent of the damage that corn causes. I'm only speculating, but these do work. It's a significant corruptive influence, but at the same time, it's still not quite the monster that some people are making it out to be. I certainly don't believe that it's responsible for the declining birth rate or for men dropping out of the dating game. So the question is, why are so many people passionately fixated upon corn as a culprit? Well, I'll give you my take. Corn is a useful and convenient scapegoat. Nobody's going to dispute the notion that many men in the West today have an addiction to corn consumption, and on the surface, this would seem to explain away many of the unique problems we currently face as a society, including the plummeting birth rate and men dropping out of the dating and marriage market. If corn be the true culprit behind these issues, then it would necessarily mean that the burden of responsibility for fixing the issues falls almost solely upon men, which is awfully convenient, especially for a certain group of people. Western women have been facing an increasing amount of scrutiny in recent years, and the responsibility for many of these issues has commonly been attributed to them, at least in part, but not without good reason. In regards to the decline in birth rates, for example, according to studies sponsored by the multilateral organizations who have focused so heavily on empowering women, a drop in the birth rate was stated as an intent behind empowering them in the first place. But it doesn't really take these studies to see the obvious pattern here. There's even a well-known anti-natalist culture attached to women's empowerment itself that tells women to focus on building their careers and tells them if they do decide to have kids to at least wait until their 30s or even later. It's apparent to anyone paying attention that women's social and economic empowerment is probably a significant contributing factor to the drop in births. But what about men dropping out of the dating and marriage market? Well, according to the millions of men who are dropping out of the dating and marriage market, a reported unreasonable increase in women's dating standards in recent years is commonly being cited, which, funny enough, is believed to be directly tied to their social and economic empowerment. The notion that women's standards are on the rise is no red pill conspiracy theory. Women themselves admit as much. Every single day, another woman takes to social media to brag about how women are allegedly no longer settling for less than what they deserve, which is really just womanese for we're no longer interested in the average Joe. Even so-called trad wives are echoing this sentiment, albeit in a slightly more thickly veiled manner. Over the past decade, Western women have been artificially boosted in every sector of society, in a manner and to a degree that no single group of people have ever experienced in human history. As a result, many women have had a taste of grandeur that no previous generation of women have ever known. Increasingly, young women are now doing better economically and socially than young men, and a growing number of women are now finding it difficult or even impossible to look up to, revere, and respect the average Joe. Despite all of this, lately, it's largely been men who have been catching the majority of the heat for these issues. Apart from standing accused of being inept coomers, men are now being told that they just aren't doing enough to live up to women's new standards, and they're even being accused by women themselves of not being real men in the first place. Women swear up and down that these soft men are the reason why they themselves can't be feminine, because apparently it's so much easier to be masculine. In recent months, a growing number of elder men, like men from Gen X and baby boomers, have been attempting to address some of the problems plaguing gender relations among people under 35. Their approach, however, has tended to center around pressuring young men to push themselves to meet women's new standards. These men are claiming that younger men need to work harder to build their assets, that they need to work harder to build their muscles, that they need to go buy books on Roman history and Greek philosophy, that they need to become more active in church, etc. They're telling these men that they have to really step it up, and that the very future of America depends upon them being able to live up to women's new standards and have a baby with them. It seems that the older men have decided that the best approach to the issue is to constructively and strategically deride younger men for being weak underachievers, I guess believing that it will have a sort of reverse psychology effect on them and will kick their butts into gear. There's only one problem with all that. Many of the men I personally know are doing just fine. Many of them are working harder than their father's generation worked, some of them a lot harder. More on that in a second. I believe the reason why these elders are allocating responsibility to younger men, despite the obvious, is because they know that these younger men are the ones who are going to be the most willing to receive it. They are the path of least resistance. There's a certain fallacy that society buys into in regards to gender issues, and that fallacy is that if women are guilty or responsible for something, then men have to at least be equally guilty or responsible. This is a fallacy that many leaders on the right and many leaders in the church buy into, and for many of these guys, you'll never see them single women out without throwing men under the bus with them, even if women just so happen to be the ones who are responsible for something. The reason they do this is because they all quietly understand that women are never going to go for it, that women might even try to punish them if they dare to point the finger in their direction. The truth, more broadly, is that many of these elder men who are currently deriding younger men have never had a spine when it comes to holding women accountable for wrongdoing. Today, these guys are afraid of losing their livelihoods, or losing their subscribers, or losing their church members, but before that, they're afraid of being cut off by their wives, etc. But there's another hidden truth to the matter, one that's even less convenient. The fact is, many of these elder men bear a large share of the responsibility for creating such a gender imbalance among young people in the first place. When millennial women came together and announced that the future would be female, it was largely these guys who co-signed, and many of these guys have spent the past decade grooming and mentoring women to assume that role. I know they did because I was there for it. I've had conversations with some of these guys in the past where they have told me that, in all fairness, women should have their chance to lead the world because men have messed the world up. That's verbatim what I was told, and of course they'll never admit anything like that today, but it happened. These men know in their hearts that they've made a huge mistake, and it seems that they're going about trying to smooth things over by taking the same generation of men that they previously threw under the bus and throwing them right back underneath the bus. I don't mean to keep rambling on this point, but I can personally attest to how unreasonable women's dating standards are today. I myself work my butt off, often 60 plus hours a week, a manual labor job. I come home and I cook clean meals for myself from scratch. I keep my place spotless. It even smells nice in here. When I get free time, pretty much all of it is spent constructively, whether it's trying to make money on the side, writing, reading the Bible, researching, making YouTube videos, etc. I'm very happy and thankful for what all I managed to accomplish in my life, and I'm good enough. I know I am. Despite being your average sinner, there's nothing of note wrong with me, and I know that by me saying so, there's inevitably going to be people out there who say that I'm full of pride, which is just how people are now because of all the guilt and baggage that they themselves are carrying around. I know what your deal is. But no matter where I go or what I do, the women of my generation, by and large, with exceptions, treat me like I'm not even a person, at best. I'm sure there's quite a few men out there who can relate very much to what I'm saying. There's a reason why so many of us are saying the same thing right now. Before I get too lost into the weeds, the bottom line is this. The reality behind these issues is a lot more complicated than people are letting on. It's certainly not the result of men using corn. And the fact is, some of these women out here are not going to be satisfied no matter what men do. Moving on, I think the second main reason why there is such a fixation upon corn is because women are convinced that corn is inhibiting their ability to influence and control men to the degree that they have been accustomed to. I've seen a few people suggest recently that women may actually be jealous of corn and believe that they're having to compete with it for male attention, but I believe the reality of the matter is a little bit more complicated. Just 10 short years ago, women were able to flutter their eyelids and men would unanimously melt in their chairs as a result. This is the reality that many women today have been accustomed to for their entire lives, and they've been accustomed to all of the power that inevitably comes with that. Based upon certain statements that I've heard women make recently, I believe that they're convinced corn is the reason why men are no longer as susceptible to their charms, but in reality, men are simply wiser to the way the game works, and I'll explain what I mean. Men are oriented on the pursuit of women, meaning men are biologically hardwired to pursue women. As a result, women become gatekeepers, and it is through this dynamic whereby women wield a great deal of power and influence over men. This dynamic enables women to set the price and to ultimately get anything they want from men if men are willing to go along with it. It enables women to direct men. It enables women to set standards and qualifications for men, requirements that men must meet in order to gain women's favor, whereby women are able to control men's beliefs, they're able to control men's behaviors, and they're ultimately able to change the composition of men's personalities if they so desire, which is exactly what they've attempted to do in recent years. Over the past decade, women, taking cues from behavioral psychology, have weaponized this dynamic as a means to challenge and subvert the traditional composition of man in the name of challenging gender norms and the like. For example, about 7 years ago, women began urging men to be more feminine or to explore their femininity or eschew their toxic masculinity. Women, motivated by political radicalism, set this as a dating standard, and as a result, a sizable portion of men began working to meet such standards. There's a lot more to what happened during this time, but we don't have time to go into all of it here. The outcome of women's effort here was pretty devastating, and it left many men wide awake to the secret workings of women in a way that they had never been awake before. Today, as we're living in the fallout of the aforementioned, women are now calling for the exact opposite. They're calling for men who make them feel safe. They want men who have muscle tone, who know how to grow tomatoes, and who stockpile weapons. They want men to be more masculine, and they're putting the call out for it. And as a result, you see thousands of men across America in a race to live up to these new standards, practically going through an identity crisis in order to make the grade. At one time, though, it would have been men as a whole who conformed to the new standard. At one time, it was men as a whole who jumped whenever women told them to. Women could effectively demand anything they wanted from any man and could expect him to work to deliver. But less and less men are willing to do that today because they've lived through quite an eye-opening ordeal, and they see through the manipulative aspect of it. They've learned from the past. This is the real reason why when a woman flutters her eyelids, men no longer melt in their chairs. It's not because they watch too much corn. It's because they're now conscious of the inner workings of such a dynamic, and they're no longer willing to be pulled to and fro by the current of it anymore. Women don't like that, they're not used to that, and they're trying to find something external to blame it on. That about summarizes my thoughts on corn. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Until next time, God keep you. I'll see you in the next video.